Push that green. They should be able to hear you online. That is on. We are recording. Caroline, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. It is 1 o'clock on the dot. I'm Adria Berry. We're in a different room than normal since the legislature is in session. We couldn't have the good round table with the recording, so we are improvising. So thanks for being here. If you are going to speak, you can come up here. We do have mics throughout, correct, Cassie?
Microphones throughout are mainly for the Teams call, so Caroline can hear us.
Okay.
So if everyone could just be as loud as you possibly can if you have something to say.
Yeah, per the Open Meetings Act, we do have one of our advisory council members who is meeting remotely. And so her address is posted on the agenda. And we went through all of the proper channels to make sure that that was done appropriately. And that is Caroline Nelson from ODAF. All right. So this agenda was posted in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Does everyone have the agenda? Whenever you are going to speak, please make sure you say your name first so that people listening will know that it's you, just in case. Well, so our recording won't catch who the person is. The recording will only catch your voice, so please say your name and then speak. All right, Cassie, please do a roll call.
Present.
Adam Austin. Catherine Brewer. Here. Brian Buzan.
Here.
Brian Hendershot.
Present.
Caroline Nelson.
Present.
David Lewis.
Present.
Jennifer Hawkins. Present. Jennifer Boyle. Present. Christy Edlin. Here. Mel Woodrow. Michael Leek.
Here.
Mike Irvin.
Here.
Norma Sapp. Here. Philip Jarina. Bonnie Kell.
Here.
Dr. Brown.
Here.
Dr. Mills.
Here.
Leslie Holloway. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. We need to consider the meeting minutes from October 20th. They were emailed out ahead of time, so I could take a motion to approve if there are no questions.
Move to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve from Michael Leek. Do we have a second? Second from Norma Sapp. Cassie, please take a vote on the minutes.
Blake Cantrell.
Aye.
Adam Austin.
To accept, right?
Oh, thank you, to accept the minutes.
Catherine Brewer. Brian Duzan.
Yes.
Brian Henderson. Caroline Nelson.
Sorry, what was the question? My office is quite loud.
Motion to accept the minutes from the October 20th meeting.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
David Lewis. Jennifer Hawkins. Jennifer Boyle. Christy Edlin. Mike Irvin. Philip Jarina.
Yes.
Norma Sapp.
Yes.
Michael Lee.
Aye.
Ronnie Kell. Dr. Ryan Brown.
Abstain.
Dr. Stan Mills.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Cassie. I'm going to go through a quick director's report and be open for questions as well. But we have some staff members lined up who can answer, I bet, a lot of the questions that you brought with you. Just to give a quick overview, we will be doing a legislative update with Barrett in just a bit, and I know that you guys have a lot of questions on that, I'm sure. Kelly and Alicia are also here to do some very important updates, as well as our legal team. All right, so Thintia, you all have surely heard or experienced firsthand the use of our new licensing platform, Thintia. We switched from Complia to Thintia. It took a little bit longer than we had planned and hoped, but we are fully launched and in the system. We are still running into problems, but we are able to call Thintia immediately and get those solved pretty quickly. If you see problems, please let us know. I hope that you have been. I believe most of you in this room, if you are working with patients or commercial applicants, you have been working on helping us find solutions. Excuse me. The great news about Thintia is many other state agencies are going to be utilizing this platform, so we'll have the ability to share information as appropriate and as legal. Licensing turnaround is looking good. I wanted to bring up for commercial licenses, based on some legislation that Barrett will touch on later, we could see a slowdown in licensing turnaround times. I think our industry has come to expect a pretty good, quick turnaround time from OMA. We're at around the 40-day mark at this moment. Statutorily, we are required to do commercial license turnaround within 90 days. Depending on the legislation that passes, we may see a slowdown, and we may even have to have a conversation about extending that 90-day period. We will continue to keep that option open unless there are concerns when Barrett comes to talk about that legislation. Patient applications are still being turned around really quickly, about a 7-day turnaround. Enforcement activity. Our law enforcement division, it's our investigative division, stood up really quickly. We got our CLEAT, thank you. CLEAT certification number. We have 7 agents on staff right now. 2 of those agents are going out and educating across the state. So they are working with local sheriff's departments, municipalities, troopers to educate on OMMA rules and statutes. We are on the front end of this, but we're getting out there. I sat in front of the Sheriff's Association last week and answered all their questions and talked with them, introduced them to one of our law enforcement liaisons, Chance Lipe. He is a retired OHP trooper, and made sure that they had that connection so they could call us with any questions they have. Excuse me. But our investigators have been out across the state helping on multiple fronts. Whenever there's a license surrender by an OMA licensee, they go out to check and make sure that there is, in fact, no product on site. Excuse me. They also help local sheriffs. They've gone out and helped with just very specific situations across the state, depending on what we're asked, but they've gone to help OBN whenever OBN has gone out on investigations. And I am proud to report, have a very good working relationship with the Bureau of Narcotics at this point. We talk consistently, we keep each other in the loop on what we're seeing, and we do it with the intent of keeping our eyes on the black market grows that are out there who are threatening the livelihood of our actual licensed businesses. Metrc update. That one is, there's a lot. So Metrc, we were so excited to come to a partial agreement with the plaintiffs in the Dr. Z-Leaf case. And that meant that the judge lifted the stay and we were able to move forward with implementing Metrc as our state contractor for seed to sale. As you have, I'm sure, heard, but just in case you haven't, licensees have until May 26th to get into Metrc. Make sure that they're signed up and in Metrc. Dispensaries have another 90 days after that to move all the products off their shelf. So basically, within 180 days of that partial order, which was a week ago Friday, I don't know the dates off the top of my head, Kelsey, February 25th. So within 180 days of February 25th, we will have an actual true hard reset of the industry. Everything after that point will be Metrc tagged and traceable across the state. There are still a couple of claims, legal claims lingering. Cameron and Marianne will give an update on that later, and you can ask questions at that point, and they will answer as much as they can based on ongoing litigation. But as far as Metrc, I had a great call with their CEO last week, let him know our expectations. We know that our licensees want more than just a couple of videos to watch as far as education is concerned. They understand that, they hear that, they've heard it from other states, and so we are working with them to make sure that we have some on-demand, really in-depth training available for our licensees. As soon as we have that available to you, we will announce it, Metrc will announce it, and everyone will know. It'll come through. The following ways are how we get in touch with our licensees: email, social media, website. Those are the top ways you will hear from us. We try to get to our licensees through every way that we can. If there is a better way, if there's something we're missing, please make sure to let us know. But training is required through our partial agreed settlement. We are going to make sure that we have some good training, and instead of just watching videos, we want to make sure that it is self-paced. Oh, that's what it is. I forgot my notes. So I had these notes, but obviously I didn't remember. Okay, so we also, Kelly's going to provide an update on NCS Analytics and how it will work together with Metrc to help us watch the data across the state about the industry. It's going to provide us with analytics on what's actually, how much product is out there, based on, we'll look at water usage and those kind of things. Hopefully we're working with the legislature on that. Cameron will update on the remainder of the Metrc case. And as of last week, we had about 7,800 licensees who are already registered with Metrc. Is that correct? And we are working with Metrc customer service to make sure they're prepared for calls, but also working with our call center to make sure that they are prepared for calls. And that is all part of the partial settlement agreement. Partial agreed order. Partial. I want to make sure I'm saying the right words. Yeah, we're hiring in our call center, training inspectors on Metrc and the handheld scanners. And we're moving quickly on all of this. The growing pains are real. You guys see it in the comment section. If you still read the comment section, I don't advise it, but growing pains are real, but they're necessary. We'll get through this. This is an important part of our growth forward and an important part of getting a hold on actually better regulating the industry. So I think that is all I had, but I am open to whatever questions you have about the topics that I just addressed. Dr. Mills?
Yes, on Metrc, I signed up over a year ago, Metrc, and of course, we went into the hiatus. And was there some discussion about not charging me for all the months I couldn't even use it?
Yes. I did talk with the CEO about that, and Metrc is working on a solution. It is theirs to announce, and I see, do we have any announcement? Nope, okay. When I spoke with him last week, he said that they were working on a solution for licensees, and it will be a good solution for licensees, but I do not have all the details. They are working out on their end how to get their system to recognize what they would like to do. But I'll tell you, they want to start out their relationship with Oklahoma licensees on a good note. That's a quote, so.
I just have a comment.
Oh yeah, and I forgot. Let's say our name before we speak. So that's Norma Sapp. Yeah.
Norma Sapp. I just have a comment. I've had a lot of complaints. Nobody from way to contact them. Not respond. That's the comment.
Okay, so when they're calling Metrc, they're not getting the response they need?
They get no kind of response anyway that they try to contact.
Okay. I will take that information to the CEO because we do need to make sure that we are being responsive, both Metrc and us, OMA. But I will tell you, I have asked them to do some roadshows and actually bring people out here to answer questions, and we are planning on that.
I know that's in the future, but these people are working on it right now.
I get it.
And they have no understanding.
Yeah, I get it. I hope that as soon as we have the information to give out, everyone will hopefully take a breath and realize we are going to provide everything we can to help people be successful. We're just not ready to announce anything just this moment yet. Yes, Mr. Irvin.
Just, Mike Irvin, I just had a quick question. I guess it's more about the attitude. Would you describe that as quite amicable, or would you have another descriptor? My question really points to words in the agreement like reasonably and adequately that are used, and if two parties are amicable about things, then those typically aren't a big issue. However, legislatively, we used to call those the attorney for employment words. So I was just wondering about the attitude of negotiations and how it ended up.
Well, you made a good point. If you see those words, you can kind of trust that they were discussed, but we have plaintiffs' counsel in the room and our counsel in the room. So I would say that it was, it came down to, we were able to reach an agreement pretty well on that day.
Very amicable. Very amicable.
Can you kind of speak to the 90 and 180 day, or Blake Cantrell, excuse me, the 90 and 180 day timelines, supposing a dispensary was inspected at day 100? Like, how does that look? Like, can you just kind of clarify that for me?
Sure, and I'd actually like to see if we should reserve that for legal to discuss. Okay. Do you want to come up and you can, okay.
We can wait, it's fine.
Yeah, my understanding is just that as long as they're in Metrc at day 90, if they have an inspection on day 100, they can still have pre-Metrc product on the shelves.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll have until day 180.
And another question related to Metrc. So initially, you know, when dispensaries were expected to be tagging all product as of the launch date, we purchased Metrc tags to accommodate that, thousands. you know, at the time thinking that we needed to tag each individual, you know, unit. Those are ordered and tagged under the dispensary's entity name. Are those tags wasted? Do we get refunded for those? Because presumably we wouldn't be able to utilize a dispensary's tag elsewhere outside of that.
That's something I'll have to defer to our legal team to look into and get you an official answer.
Okay, yeah, just, my understanding is they're assigned to each entity and we have thousands of them with that expectation. Can we shift them to a different license or what to do with those now that they're not expected?
Okay, I haven't asked that question, so we will look into that.
Thank you.
Are you here with the public? I'm sorry, with the public, there's no public comment at this, right, per open meetings, but we can take questions from our board member or advisory council members. Okay. Okay, any other questions from council members? I will be turning it over to I'm a little scattered, excuse me. All right. Next, number 4 is introduction of new Medical Marijuana Advisory Council members. So this is our first meeting of the Medical Marijuana Advisory Council that was created by statute last year. We had the opportunity to add some folks, as you see some new faces in the room, excuse me, or hear some new voices if you're listening in. All right, let's go through. I will introduce and give a brief overview of who they represent as far as medical marijuana. So we have 7 new members. One would be Mr. David Lewis, and he is from Stability Cannabis, which is a grow facility, correct? Thank you. We have Jennifer Hawkins here, and she is a patient advocate. We have Jennifer Boyle, who is here. She is with the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. Happy to have you, thank you. We have Mr. Ronnie Kell, who is an OMA licensee, business licensee, primarily grow. We have Dr. Ryan Brown, a physician with OU Health Science Center. And you are a pediatrician, correct?
Pediatric emergency medicine and child.
Okay. Happy to have you, thank you.
I'm sorry, what was that hospital again?
OU. Dr. Stan Mills, who is an OMA business licensee and also a former professor at the OU College of Pharmacy, among other colleges. That was just your most recent one, correct?
That was the last one.
He has an alphabet behind his name, so he has a lot of years of knowledge and experience in both cannabis and pharmacy and pharmaceuticals and medical healthcare generally. I'm sorry? No. Yeah, he has a commercial license.
Yes, processor.
And then we have Catherine Brewer from the District Attorney's Council. Happy to have you, Catherine. Good to see you. All right. The remaining members were all members of the Food Safety Standards Board, which was in place prior to the Medical Marijuana Advisory Committee, or Council, excuse me. So they are all continuing members, and we are kind of starting fresh today with this new group. And since it's the middle of legislative session, we don't have rules to discuss this time around. We can take recommendations on rules we should consider in our next round of rulemaking. But otherwise, we're really just going to give you guys an update on what's going on within OMMA, but also, excuse me, hear from our council on what you would advise that we look at, what we should be digging into and working towards over the next few months before we meet again. Our first update from a staff member will be from Alicia Harris. She is our Director of Planning and Engagement. She's here to give you an update on our stakeholder engagement side of OMA.
Trying to make sure you get them all.
Thank you. Wow. Caroline? Could you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Do you have any, when did it mute? Do you have any questions on what we've been discussing?
It muted right when the Ms. Harris came up. So I don't have any questions right now.
Got it. Okay. So the budget update, I will be happy to recap that for you, Caroline. We can do that offline though. Right? Legally? Okay. Next, we will have Alicia Harris up for stakeholder engagement.
Okay, thank you, Adria. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to give you a brief update on a few things that the stakeholder engagement team has been working on. The first item is the medical working group. The medical working group was established at the beginning of this year, and the goal is to just discuss any issues or concerns that could potentially affect anybody within the medical profession that's licensed to recommend medical marijuana or those that may potentially want to become licensed. So we have representation from the Hospital Association, several of the medical licensure boards, including the DO board and the MD board, podiatry as well. We've had 2 meetings thus far. Our focus has been first and foremost opening the lines of communication between all parties involved, because that was something that we did not have prior to these meetings being established. And then ensuring there's a clear understanding of the work within OMA that could potentially affect the members of these various groups. So that's been our primary focus, but our last discussion actually centered around certain suggestions that this working group had. One of those suggestions, I believe, Michael Leek will cover later on in the agenda, but just to give you some background, it is related to potential legislation and some of the things that the working group would like to see come about. The next thing that's on your agenda there is our listening sessions. So a lot of people have asked, what are the listening sessions? I just want to give you a brief understanding of what they are, the purpose of them. So the listening session is similar to a focus group, and it's typically facilitated by someone within the OMA. It's a group of people aimed at collecting information about their experience or their concern. Participants in the listening session are asked to talk about what they know and then to think through some specific answers and questions for these topics, and generally to try to understand the opportunities and challenges surrounding those topics. And so we try to have those listening sessions at least quarterly, but sometimes we have them more, actually. Our initial listening session started late last year. Some of you attended those, and those were really focused around testing criteria because there were a lot of questions and concerns related to our testing. Our most recent listening session that we decided to have actually started as a planning session, and that was related to patient safety, as that is a large concern, of course, for the OMA, but also for many of our licensees. And several items came up out of that listening session that I think will lead to more opportunities to discuss. Some of those items were things regarding suggestions for schools to establish protocols if a child comes to school and has been negatively exposed to marijuana. That is something that's going to require a lot more discussion, so more to come on that. And then just some guardrails around pediatric use, whether it be a parent having those guardrails or the actual child. There needs to be more discussion about that. So there will be another patient safety session discussion in the near future. The next session that we are actually holding immediately is going to be this Thursday, and that is a veterans listening session. That will be held from 1 to 2:30 at the Oklahoma Water Board. If anyone's interested in attending that or has questions about that, you can certainly speak to me about that, or anyone on our executive team. Beyond that, I wanted to give you all an update on our educational conference that will be held this year. So the OMMA is proud to say that we're going to hold our first education conference on October 13th and 14th here in Oklahoma City. The purpose of the conference is to educate licensees and stakeholders on the regulations, issues, concerns, and other topics of interest related to medical marijuana in Oklahoma. The venue is being finalized. A landing page will be placed on our website. It'll have registration links, the agenda, all of the education sessions that we'll offer. And so that will be something that will be available to the public very soon. Are there any questions about any of those updates that I've shared? Okay, thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Kelly Williams. I'm the Director of Operations here at OMMA. I do have a presentation for you about one of our upcoming items. Oh, great. So we are working with NCS Analytics. We have contracted with them, and they are a company that will help analyze the data that we receive right now from our monthly reports and soon from Metrc. So once that is up and running, we'll have a lot more real-time data. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is making sure that we make good use of the data that we have. And our seed to sale system will certainly be a good source of that data, but what are we going to do with it? And NCS will really help us in that respect. NCS is a advanced analytics firm. They work in high-risk industries. They started in 2015 in Colorado, and they've been working in the cannabis space for some time. And we're really excited to be working with them because what they will help us do is collect and analyze data from all sorts of different sources, monitor and alert us to any anomalies in the data that might suggest things like inversion or diversion, and help us report and predict based on that information. So the types of data that this is going to digest, not just our seed to sale, but also our licensing data, point of sale data from our licensees, socioeconomic data, tax data, bank data. If at any point we are able to also access information regarding utilities, water, lights, everyone in this room knows that lights and water are very highly correlated to output for a lot of our licensees, especially on the grows. So it'll digest all of that data in real time, collect it, and put it through its machine learning algorithms. And that will help alert us to things that we need to take action on. That can include identification of patterns. If, for instance, a licensee had a large number of plants of a certain type and they had certain growing methods, we would have expected a certain amount of yield from these licensees. If they reported a vastly greater or vastly lower amount of output, that would alert us that we might need to go on site and identify what's going on. It might be as simple as a new lighting rig or changes to the type of strain that they are growing. Sometimes it's just a matter of us going out on site, asking a few questions, resolving the issue, and moving on. But sometimes it might be a matter that our investigation unit needs to identify the source of the problem, or that our friends at OBN might need to be involved. It will help us to react properly and very quickly to real information and really help inform what we do. It also allows for behavioral analytics. Those are the things like with the changes in lights, changes in processing methods, hot spotting. It can identify geographical areas or certain licensees that we need to be paying more attention to. And the initiation of trigger events, those are those processes or those changes, those data anomalies that tell us that we need to go out on site and we need to do something. The reporting that they do, it helps to identify a number of different things, whether perhaps somebody is reporting a different number for their sales totals to OBN than what they're reporting to OMMA. In most cases, those should match, or if they don't match, then maybe they're providing their data incorrectly. So it's either that or there's a problem with what they're doing with their business. So that's going to help us, whether that's tax data, whether that's total yield, all of those different pieces. They'll also help provide a lot of context to the data. We have an extremely large market here in Oklahoma. And what they can do is look at data like this. This is an efficiency curve that they developed after looking at more than 8,000 batches of hydrocarbon wax. You can see the typical potency, kind of there's that central tendency curve right there. There's a few folks who can get a much higher potency in that product. And then you've got those licensees way down at the end that suddenly have a much higher output, much higher concentration than you would expect. So it provides context to our data, not just within our own industry, but with that licensee themselves. If they're suddenly getting 20% more than what they had been getting for the past 6 months or year, we might need to take a look at what's going on there. Did they really just break through in some new market revolution, or are they really inverting product or adding in ingredients that they really shouldn't be? So it will help us go on site and address issues like that. If there are any other data folks in the room, you know that this is a lot of data to take in, right? We know with all of the reporting requirements, we're going to know how many plants, what kind of strain, when different events occurred, what kinds of processing is taking place. So it will help digest all of that information in real time. And that will help us be more precise and more efficient in our actions as a regulatory body and keeping tabs on what's going on. It will also help us rapidly extinguish certain behaviors. We can set alerts based on our own pet peeves. So if we really wanted to target lack of tax remission, or if we really wanted to target people not reporting waste properly, we can focus in on those reports. We can set the alerts based on what we need to focus on. Send our folks out there, send out those NOVs, really make it a point to address a certain issue. And what they have found with the other states they work on is that very rapidly diminishes that type of behavior and helps resolve those issues. So this is really going to be a game changer for us. I've talked a little bit about some of the insights that it's going to provide to us. Again, they've got the information all across the Oklahoma market. They've got information from the market across the nation and the other states that they work in, and they're going to help us use that in more efficient, more effective ways and really revolutionize what we're doing. They also have their experts on demand to us. So we can ask questions of them. When they identify these anomalies, they can say, hey, in other places, that has been an indicator of X or Y. You should go out and ask these questions to help resolve it. So they can really help us build out our team and our expertise in responding to these kinds of notifications. Again, that priority identification for audit, and their language is a little different. So when we say audit in Oklahoma, we could mean audit or inspections for compliance. In other cases, they say audit for both types of activities, but we've got those broken out here. Anomaly detection, like we've talked about, wholesale market validation. Again, they've got data from all these other states. So if the curves look very different here in Oklahoma, we need to be able to explain why, and they can help us target those behaviors. Audit support, that's also inspection support. What do we need to be looking for when we go on site to look at this specific type of anomaly? So this is really powerful data tool that we're very excited about, but they also support us in a variety of other ways. They have industry experts on demand that will help train up our new staff. So it is perfectly possible with a regulatory body the size of OMMA. You know, we've got admins who start out knowing nothing about cannabis. They can sit in on these trainings and learn more about the industry that we work in. So they're going to help us offer those trainings to our staff. They've got a whole library of different topics that we can learn about, and also policy and procedure support, because they've been working in these other states, identify those common issues, common causes, and help us to make sure that we're behaving appropriately, that we're regulating and have the tools that we need. All of these things will really help us prioritize the actions of our compliance audit team and our investigations division. So while they might be processing tens of thousands, or in this case, you know, what are we at, 12, 13,000 commercial licensees, they're analyzing all that data, saying, hey, there's a few things that you need to work on, but these are the really important things, and these places, those are the places you need to visit today based on what we've seen. They've been in a number of other areas, and so these are a couple of case studies that they've provided to us. So Monterey County, California, when they first got started in the 1920 fiscal year, they were collecting about $623,000 in taxes in that county. The next fiscal year after NCS was helping them with this, they were at $1.23 million in tax collections. So they more than paid for themselves just by making sure that the industry was paying the taxes that they should have been paying the whole time. Similarly, another county in California, they also improved on-time reporting, right? That is a huge issue there, because the better and more timely reporting of the data that you have, the more useful this kind of activity is. So they really helped with that and also increased their tax collections dramatically. So not only are they looking at the whole market and letting us look at the patterns there, but they're also looking at individual businesses. So based on the information for each licensee, they have a projected amount of sales that they would expect from that licensee. Then they look at their actual reported sales and the gap in between there and the gap in the tax remittance that should have been. So they've been doing this in a number of real places for a long time, and it's definitely had a good return of investment for the other regulatory bodies that they've been working with. One thing of note for everyone in this room, they've been also, their transparency project is also something that we're very excited about. So you can actually go to their website and see their transparency project for a few of the counties that they work with and other regulatory bodies. It will put real-time, real information about Oklahoma's industry there for everyday folks to use and to understand. So whether this is the top categories of retail sales, the top month sales patterns, you can look at those things across the state, and that's there for everyone. So the goal of that project, as they say, is to raise awareness and understanding about the complex and rapidly growing cannabis industry, and I'm sure everyone in this room is going to be very excited about that. So just a little bit about where we're at with them right now. So they're already working on analyzing the monthly reporting data that we've been collecting for some time now. They're also getting synced in with Metrc and Thentia, our new licensing vendor. So as soon as that's up and running, they will be able to digest and start making use of that data with us. So we're very excited about that. We're going to be building out our specialized and customized reporting tools, deciding what alerts we want to prioritize, and then working on training our staff on how to make use of those alerts and reports. So very excited about that. And then the next,
Dr. Williams,
yes.
normal staff here. I wanted to ask about that company. Is that a new budget item?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
How do you approve it?
I don't know if you want to talk about the budget approval process, or if you want me to.
I mean, you can talk just about how long it took.
Yeah. So contracting does take quite some time for the state, and the approval process, we do have to get approval for any budget item of a certain size, not just from the commissioner, but also from the cabinet secretary. So the Health and Human Services secretary oversees us, and they have to approve line items of a certain size. So this had to go through quite a few layers of approval.
We can definitely, let me look it up.
Yeah, I don't want to misquote.
I'm curious.
Yeah, in every state that they've been in, they have more than paid for themselves with that more appropriate collection of tax revenue. Okay. All right, so the next item that oh, yes.
Blake Cantrell. So as far as like figuring out where to set those flags on discrepancies, are they using all the data that OMA has historically from those monthly reports? Is that being used, or is it beginning as a metric implementation?
So they are currently working to analyze our monthly reporting data as we speak, and they can certainly use that to help us identify our priority flags. But that's also an internal conversation that we need to be having about where we want to emphasize our responses.
With those being self-reported, obviously there's going to be issues.
Yes, we've had a number of.
How do they figure out what's data? My concern would, I think it's fantastic, first of all, to have as a licensee. My only worry would be because we're going on self-reported data over 3 years, some being, as we know, illegal operations potentially in the data, that a flag would trigger based on that data where there would be one otherwise.
So when we first started talking with them about this, we were very clear about the fact that we use self-reported monthly data. There's missing data, there's bad data, and they are very experienced in that type of reporting because they do have regulators who don't have real-time data or have not always had real-time data, and they are working to go through that and clean that. And they do have algorithms that help identify data that may not be accurate, and sometimes inaccurate data is a reason for us to go on site and identify what that discrepancy is. Yes.
Matter, of course, I'm sure that the data privacy is prevalent. But would MCS be allowed to utilize that data either, it looks like they couldn't do it on an aggregate basis if they're posting it online, but just simple contact information. I mean, I'm sure extremely few people out here would appreciate getting a dozen phone calls from people because they sold our contact information. Someone selling condos in Branson or whatever. And has that been considered in the contract?
So I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to misspeak, but data security and data privacy are certainly part of that. And the only thing that they're doing with this data is informing us where to take action. I'm sure we could get more detailed information about the specifics of that contract for you, but I don't want to misquote it.
Is that contract available? Do you need to put in a public records?
It would be subject to an open records request. If you wanted to request it that way, you would be given a copy of it. I know that for sure.
David Lewis, last question. When do you anticipate this system?
So they're already crunching the numbers for our past monthly reporting data. I think that they're going to be more than ready by the time everyone is in Metrc. Yeah. They've worked with Metrc in a number of other states, so it's not a big lift for them to connect there.
I do have one clarifying question. Blake Cantrell, what happens with those monthly on Metrc implementation? Do those still need to be completed and sent to OBN? Or will, I was under the impression Metrc steps into the shoes of that report. But does OBN have access to it, or do we still have to email them?
So I certainly can't speak on behalf of OBN's requirements and whether or not Metrc implementation would have any bearing on their requirements, but our goal is for Metrc to replace the monthly reporting requirements. So you won't be doing both of those once we're fully implemented.
They're in then, correct?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, and with that, the next item on my agenda is to talk about our staffing update. Last legislative session, House Bill 2904 set us to task to ensure that we achieved our hiring goals for OMMA. It required that we increase by a total of 76 staff in certain positions. When that bill was passed, we had 96 staff, and today we have 187. So we've increased by over 91, well, by 91 as of today, but we're growing every week. We were asked specifically to hire at least 62 staff members in compliance and enforcement, and that has been the last goal that we've been trying to achieve. With the cohort that starts this week, we will be one hire shy of that, and we do have a position already accepted for someone who's going to start in our April training cohort. So by the time we get to that date, we expect we will have exceeded that requirement because we do have other offer letters that are going out for that training cohort as well. So that is a very big win there, that we will have met all 62 of those required hires in compliance. We had a requirement for at least 4 investigatory officers, and as Executive Director Barry mentioned earlier, we now have 7. In planning and logistics, we were required to hire at least 4, and we have more than surpassed that. In legal and financial, we were required to hire at least 6 on top of the 6 we have. We are now at 12, so we have doubled in legal and financial support, and then we had a few other positions that we've increased as well. So we have done a great job hiring there. So you will be seeing, we have compliance inspectors in every region across the state now, and a lot of that is heavily concentrated here in the Oklahoma City area and the Tulsa areas, but we have people all across the state now who will be dedicated to inspecting within their region. So if you have not seen any of our compliance staff yet, you will soon, and we're very excited about that. Any questions on that? We do still have positions open in inspections and in other jobs as well, so please visit our website. We do have a careers page if you have anyone who's interested in coming to work for OMMA. Yes.
I'm just supposed to ask you this. If you become a compliance officer, licenses, a business license or patient license?
So anyone who works at OMMA is not able to have a commercial license. So those are one or the other. We don't ask about patient license status. We're not legally allowed to, I don't think. Okay. All right, so the last update I've been asked to give is about our building move. While we love our home here, we are, as you might guess, rapidly expanding the spaces that we had expected when we moved in over a year ago. So starting with April 1, we will be moving into the Connors building. That's one of those 3 white buildings just north of the Capitol. They are currently fitting that space for us and building it out. So we're going to have a phased move beginning in April. We hope to be done before July hits, but we will be over there very soon. We're going to have 3 floors in that building because, as we mentioned, we have staffed up very rapidly and we still have more positions to fill. So we're very excited to land over there, though we will definitely miss this view. Unless you have any questions, that concludes my update. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Barrett Brown. I'm the Deputy Director and Director of Public Policy here at OMMA, and this is the legislative session update. Given that it is post 1:30, I'm pleased to report that the House and Senate are both currently in session. Thank you. I'm just kidding. So as you all are aware, there is a lot of marijuana legislation that's been filed this session. We're past the initial deadline, which is getting out of committee in the originating chamber. So there are some policies that are, I'll call them mostly dead absent some sort of rather extraordinary legislative action, but there's still a significant number of legislation that's out there. For those who may have missed it, the House Republican Caucus Medical Marijuana Working Group had a press conference this morning during which they outlined a 12-point legislative agenda that they are going to be pushing this session. And sort of the high points are to implement seed to sale, which we've already talked about. They want to require pre-license inspections, separate license for wholesalers, tiered licensing structure. Oh, great. Kelsey here is going to pull up our website, upon which you can see we provide some legislative updates. I can't keep talking, but this kind of interrupted my train of thought here, so I'd rather just stand here awkwardly while we watch this go. Yes, licenses for wholesalers, some sort of tiered licensing structure. And here you can see on our website. Do I have control of this? Yes, indeed. So here's some legislative updates. We've sort of categorized some of the legislation based on what it affects. Let's just go with growers, because that's all everybody wants to talk about. And here's a list of, at the legislature, yes, not us. We love all of our licensees equally. So here you have House bills and Senate bills, generally affecting growers. So please feel free to navigate to our website and peruse at your leisure. But there's, I'm sure a lot of you have specific questions. There's really only two OMMA request bills, and that is Senate Bill 1755. I'm pretty sure I got that right. Authored by Senator Lee Wright for pre-licensure inspections. As a general matter, that piece of legislation and the idea of pre-licensure inspections will really only affect licensees that are establishing a business in unincorporated areas of counties that do not have zoning or planning ordinances. If you're opening up a business in a major metropolitan area in Oklahoma, there's a chance you're going to be inspected prior to getting your license from OMMA anyway. So this is just making sure that those businesses that aren't otherwise being inspected get some sort of inspection or a review of their business plans prior to being operational and growing, dispensing, processing, et cetera. The other request bill is House Bill 3813, authored by Representative Preston Stinson. And that bill is just to clarify the law enforcement authority of our investigators. It's not to expand it, it's just to clarify, kind of trying to narrowly establish the lane that we want the OMMA investigators to be in. We don't want to be OBN, we don't want to be local law enforcement, we just want to be OMMA investigators to assist in our otherwise activities. I'm sure there are a lot of questions. Yes, Ms. Sapp. So we already have that, but yes, all of our investigators are CLEAT certified. Just the 7, not all of the compliance inspectors. So inspectors are the compliance guys, the investigators are the law enforcement guys and gals. Yes, sir.
Samuel, the legislation that's on the website, is that legislation that has actually come?
So we're working on updating that right now to categorize that, to let you know what is and is not out of committee. I feel compelled to just give you a small caveat that there's different types of legislation that are not subject to legislative deadlines, and there's always the ability for a chamber to get into the weeds. I apologize. I'm trying to keep this high level here. Any other questions? Yes. Not at this point. No. I'm sorry. I didn't catch the or. My apologies. Can you restate your question? No, not at this point. Yes. Click on the administration tab or the administrative tab right here, and then 2022 legislative session updates. That is correct. Ta-da. Any other questions? Yes.
Blake Cantrell. First, board may be. As far as granted, just tell me if you can't speak to it, I understand, but as far as the couple bills that move OMMA to its own agency, the standalone agency, do you all have a position on those? Would that be a benefit to you, or?
So we don't have a position on those bills. Like most of the bills, the medical marijuana bills filed this session, we haven't taken a position on, other than to say that we will implement largely whatever the legislature tells us to.
That's as far as y'all can go on these?
Yes.
Okay. You don't have an
Do you want
opinion
me to
as
go for it?
conceptually, at least, maybe not the individual bill?
I mean, in anticipation of that legislation, we are planning internally to prepare for that if we need to do that. There's a lot of things that we don't currently do that the state health department does that we need to be prepared to take over those operations, things like HR, legal, finance, things like that. Moving over to the Connors building, obviously doing that in April, we would be doing that regardless of whether or not we were within the state health department or not. But in the event that that legislation does pass, we will be in the Connors building, which would help facilitate that transition.
No, you did good. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, that the reason we don't take a position on legislation is because we're not actually allowed to as a state agency. What we do is we approach it in a mindset of going to talk with legislators and let them know how the bill would impact the industry that we regulate, or the agency internally. So that's why we don't say we oppose or, completely agree with any certain bill. As far as the standalone, we truly stand ready to implement that. We know it's been out there. We know that Majority Floor Leader Eccles has been talking about it for years. So we had a heads up that it would be out there. And so we started preparing internally so that we could be prepared if they pass at this session. But I think that we would, welcome their ideas on that. But good job.
I don't know if there's any other questions. If there's no other questions, then I will go back to my seat. Great.
Hello, my name is Cameron Cavs. I'm the managing counsel for OMA. So I just got a couple quick legal updates for y'all. The first one has kind of already been hit on just a little bit. Actually, I don't have too much more to add there. So as you all know, with Metrc, we came to it, an agreed order was entered on February 25th. This requires that within 90 days from the date of the order, all licensees must be in compliance with Metrc. So from there, that gives them until May 26th to get compliant. Obviously, you have the 180 days until dispensaries have to sell or dispose of the rest of their products that are not tagged. And so that date's on August 24th. This is still ongoing, so this was only a partial resolution. The biggest thing that this agreed order did, was lift a temporary restraining order that was preventing us from implementing Metrc. And that temporary restraining order had been in place since April of 2021. And so we're excited about that. There are still a couple claims remaining. The main claim remaining would be whether licensees are wrongfully required to pay for implementation of the Metrc seed-to-sale tracking system. There's also a claim with regards to whether we misapplied funds, and then whether class action status is appropriate. So those are the only claims remaining. Other than that, everything has been dismissed without prejudice. And so a hearing will be reset in the future. I do not have a date for that yet. My next update would be with our foreign financial interest attestation cases. In July of 2021, a new bill came into effect that required all licensees, or most licensees, to submit a foreign financial attestation with OB&DD. If they did not submit that attestation, that required them to have their license immediately revoked. As you probably know, that has been a significant undertaking for our legal team. So currently it's me, and then we have 3 other attorneys, and then we also have Mary Ann, our new senior counsel. And so to give you a little bit of a better idea, there have been 948 foreign financial attestation cases that have been referred to us to date, and then 791 of those have been filed. So we've filed on 800 cases. We've had ongoing hearing dockets where we'll set about 50 at a time. Our biggest priority through all this is to restore compliance. And so there has been a lot of compliance that's been restored. Even if you have your license revoked, you still have 60 days to have your license reinstated after that revocation. So you still have the opportunity to get into compliance by submitting that foreign financial interest. And so mainly we have another 141 hearings set for next week. And once we get through that, we've made it through our first big cycle. However, licensees are still under the duty to submit a foreign financial attestation with OBNDD even 60 days after they receive a license. And so those cases are going to be ongoing, but nonetheless, it's been a significant undertaking, but we've made it most of the way through with the initial batch there. Any questions? Yeah.
Blake I'm sure y'all are aware of this, but I think one of the main things still hanging out there, at least with my setup with Ventia, is that it's showing all the foreign attestations as not having been received still in the Ventia system. You all have the timeline on that?
Okay.
Okay. That was the only thing in the system, I think, related to that was still hanging out there.
No, thank you.
And then following Metrc, I imagine that, less of the concern will become eventually about illegal operators operating under the guise of a legitimate license. So following Metrc, when hopefully enforcement actions are beginning and some of this is getting cleaned up, do you all have a plan about how to identify outright illegal operations that you wouldn't have a record of or be able to check whether they're in compliance?
So I'm going to defer on that one.
Are you saying unlicensed?
Yeah, so, following Metrc's implementation, there presumably, in wake of that, there will be people who formerly were operating legitimately, allow the license to lapse, but continue operating, or people who pop up that were never licensed to begin.
Yeah.
How do you all identify those operators? And do you have a game plan for tackling that?
Well, I mean, that falls within the law enforcement side, so OBN's jurisdiction, but we'll continue working with them. I think if the legislature, especially the House, House and Senate, because we love them equally, but the House did their press conference today, and they talked about ensuring proper signage at all licensed facilities. Things like that are going to help identify unlicensed facilities across the state. But there, I think, are a lot of keys to it. I think NCS analytics, well, that's with our licensees, but for an unlicensed person, we're not going to necessarily have eyes on them unless our inspectors are out in the field and see something fishy, and then we loop in local law enforcement and potentially OBN. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of you won't be able to directly answer it until you get there, but, I can just see our current issue of non-compliant operators or, operating
right.
under the guise of legality,
Just
shifting to that. And if it's, for example, a dispensary that allows a license to lapse, the general public's not going to know that they're back at house and in order.
right.
So just, that would be moving.
Correct. I look at it like this. I don't think that there is one part of our plan that is fail-proof. I think it's going to be Metrc plus NCS analytics plus compliance inspectors across the field plus law enforcement assistance. All of those things together are going to help shine a light on anyone who shifts to the black market after they choose not to go into Metrc compliance. And I mean, I think we can look at other states and see, learn from their history of how that did happen after Metrc or seed to sale implementation. Mr. Irvin?
Mike Irvin, maybe I'm wrong, I thought he might have been licensed.
Yeah, I think that while you were talking, I was thinking about that, and that's a great idea. we'll take that under advisement. I'm sorry, we can't do public comment because we didn't set ourselves up for public comment in an open meeting, right? Okay, so we're taking questions and comments from the advisory council. And Cameron's time is still on. Does anybody have questions for our legal department while Cameron's here? Okay, we're moving on to, Cassie asked for any council members who might have something they specifically want to talk about today, and we had a couple respond, and the first will be Michael Leek from the Osteopathic Physician Board.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Leek from the Osteopathic Board. What we do at the DO Board is we oversee all the osteopathic physicians in the state. So that's they have to license with us before they can practice medicine, with the exception of VA facilities and tribal facilities. There's some hoops there, but more importantly, and I know this was discussed earlier by Ms. Harris, we have been meeting the licensing boards that do have providers that do the recommendations. We have been huddling together and talking about issues that impact us as common practice across all of us. Lyle Kelsey, who runs the allopathic board that oversees, for example, Dr. Brown's license, as well as he also oversees the podiatry board. And those are the three groups of physicians, to my understanding, that can prescribe or recommend marijuana. And the issue that was brought to my attention about 2 years ago now was a referral, in fact, from the OMMA to our office to investigate a physician who was allegedly, and I use the word allegedly because it comes to find out that there was some fraud involved, not by him, but by somebody else using his signature. Well, that's his story. And basically, my problem came to requesting the records. And so I had a complaint from OMA, and I asked for a list of patients. And understandably, because their hands were tied firmly by the way the law was written, these records are sealed. And for anybody in the legal field knows that if anything's sealed, typically requires a judge to sign an order to release those records. For me to obtain the records that I needed in the investigation, which the doctor was cooperative in, I had to get a grand jury subpoena from the multi-county grand jury at the AG's office, which is extremely aggressive in my opinion and not something that I want to do routinely. And so I have made requests through the licensing group that we're meeting, and I know I've done it multiple times, the Food Safety Standards Board, and I promised that I would continue bringing this issue up until it's resolved. I have not heard from anybody in the industry. I've not heard from any physicians that have objection to this type of request that would allow the physician licensing boards limited access to patient records for the purpose of an official investigation. And some of the things we've thrown out there is whether the OMA should send those records over to our office or whether we should join up with their investigators and allow them to keep the records but coordinate an investigation. To me, it doesn't matter. I work well with multiple agencies from OBN to DEA to OMMA, so I have no problem doing that. But we just have to fix that law to allow our ability to do it. What I have heard from the industry folks, from the few that I have talked to, is they are interested in making sure this is done the right way. They seem to suggest to me they don't want a rubber stamp on the medical marijuana recommendations. As many of you know, there's no requirements. We do not have rules at the board that say a doctor has to find this diagnosis or this diagnosis to make a recommendation. Surprisingly or not, we actually stay out of that. We try to remove ourselves as much as possible, as long as the practice is safe. We try to remove ourselves from being in between the physician and their patient. So my whole point in bringing this up, as I promised to everybody that's heard me before, is I'm going to continue bringing this issue up until we find a resolution. I have met with a few legislators who have expressed interest in making this fix. They have told me that wasn't the idea when we wrote when the law was passed. That wasn't exactly what we had in mind. And so hopefully, I don't know if it'll be this session, Mr. Brown will probably be able to talk a little bit better about whether there's any legislation. I'm not aware of anything specific on point to fix my issue, but conversations are ongoing. My request to anybody in the industry, if you do have objections to the way we're trying to go about this, I'd like to hear from you. I have not, like I said, I've not heard from any negative feedback from my request to try and get our access to these records. And so if there is any kind of concern, I'd like to hear it so we could try to find a way around it and try to find a reasonable solution. One thing I will emphasize too is if we were to use those records in a public hearing, they would not be made public. It would be done in a sealed fashion, just like if you were to handle maybe like a minor child situation in court that is typically done where it's, they use their initials and they try not to disclose their name or any identifying factors. We would do everything we possibly could to make sure we protect the names of the patients and those folks involved. So any questions? Yes, sir.
Is there another instance of where the board specifically would access confidential patient records?
Outside of the medical marijuana realm? Every day. We have the ability, because we are HIPAA compliant. So oftentimes a doctor will say, well, I can't talk to you about this case because of HIPAA, and I'm happy to inform them. HIPAA to our office in the context of an official investigation. That doesn't mean I can call, I'm going to pick on Cameron, for example. I can't go call Cameron's doctor and say, hey, I'm from the board. You can just tell me what's going on at in his medical chart. No, it has to be in the context of an official investigation. But we are HIPAA compliant. We're able to get psychiatric records if needed, and we do that by subpoena. And the physicians, if, for example, if they don't cooperate, that in of itself is a violation, and they could risk losing, or I say losing their license, that's pretty drastic. They could risk discipline.
So if it took a subpoena, that would take. Right?
Not necessarily. A subpoena could be signed by an attorney. And so since the records are sealed, I'm of the belief, and I think many of the lawyers in the room would probably agree that if it's a sealed record, then that needs to be unsealed by by a judge's order. And so whereas, HIPAA records aren't sealed, they're kept confidential. And so I'm still able to access those because we're waived from that confidentiality part of it. But since the records for marijuana are sealed, I'm of the position, as well as I know I share, I believe, with some at the Marijuana Authority, that requires a judge to sign off on that. And just for those of you that don't know, a multi-county grand jury subpoena is actually signed by a judge. Any other questions? And if you would like to chat with me about it afterwards, feel free to stop me. I'll be happy to give you my card and we could talk further. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is a bit of a nuanced issue, so hopefully if people have questions, they'll come to you. And next we have Blake Cantrell.
Lou, I am Blake Cantrell with the Peak Dispensaries, and out of character for me, I will try to be brief. So I had added this to the agenda, and Director Berry, thank you for allowing me the time to speak. Just in case some of the issues that are on all of our minds were not addressed, and to her credit, she did add all the topics that I had asked that be touched on to the agenda. I just wanted to pass along a little feedback that I've been getting just from others in the industry, and I don't want to go so far as to say that I'm speaking on their behalf, only speaking on behalf of myself. But as far as the legislation goes, it is really tough out there right now for licensees, which I'm sure either all of you have either experienced or heard. I think that a lot of our issue is related to illegality in the market, and for example, at retail, a race to the bottom in unsustainable retail pricing for those of us dispensaries as a result of largely, if not outright, casual non-compliance or not baking in the cost of compliance. Illegal grows are what we see the most of, and to OBN's credit, they have been enforcing against. I am always a fan of seeing normalcy or any effort towards it in the market, and enforcement is the key to that, in my opinion. So in the absence of the ability for us to get out there and be, very diligently enforcing, we've got a bunch of bills here that could kind of assist in that vein. It's impossible for us licensees to compete with illegality. That's just the reality. And it's also impossible for us to price compete with people who have not baked in the cost of compliance to their operation. And essentially what's going to happen is after inevitable market contraction, much of which I believe will probably come in the immediate days and 12 months following Metrc, a lot of us, particularly dispensaries, will be left holding a price point or holding the bag after everybody else exits the market with a retail price point that's unsustainable, that we're now going to be put in the position of having to raise prices on our patients. Of the bills out there, my point in saying all of this is that those of us in the industry who are doing things right are very much in favor of enforcement, very much in favor of Metrc. What we are not in favor of is over legislation in an attempt to course correct the industry, because the legislation that we have on the books is fine for the most part. It allows for all the things that need to happen, and OMA was put in a tough position to have to try to retroactively enforce against all this stuff. But that's the situation that we're currently in. And with all of this legislation coming through, there's a couple different things. Moratoriums. I actually am not terribly opposed to the way that these are structured, because it puts it at the discretion of OMMA, and under Director Barry and the rest of this team, I have confidence that they will do that appropriately. The other formation of it is license caps. With a lottery system, all these things, these feel like they are an attempt to, address all of these issues that likely constituents have been bringing to the legislatures. But this is just adding on top of a system that is structured properly. It just hasn't had an opportunity or the resources or whatever to be able to effectively enforce them to date. So that is, to me, more important than any sort of, of these bills going through. In the absence of a barrier to entry, so to speak, in the form of a moratorium or a license cap, in my opinion, REC would be another way to do that. To be perfectly honest, in the past, I have been opposed to REC because it exacerbates the problems that I've been talking about. But again, those of us that are doing things correctly in the industry cannot operate at a loss in perpetuity. And in the absence of more strict enforcement or a moratorium or something along these lines, then REC opens up our customer base. So that is why I'm in support of it today in the absence of additional enforcement. My concern about the current construction is because it's this and many other of these bills that are contingent on enforcement, give me pause, because making a REC license that's a $25,000 entry fee annually, all that does is make my cost of doing business go up exponentially in order to be in the REC market. And then everyone operating under a medical license is just going to sell to adults anyway without enforcement. That is my concern. So I don't see a way where that works under the current environment or in the current environment. If we were to bring up, like, I'm not opposed to an increased license fee either, and many of the people I've spoken with aren't assuming it's reasonable, because again, a barrier to entry is a consolidation, contraction in this market is what's needed, because I think we can all agree that it's oversaturated at every level. Standalone OMMA, to the extent that that will effectuate all these things I'm talking about, I am 100% behind. However, this is the only time I'm going to mention a bill. The SB 1543 dissolves this council. It vests rulemaking authority exclusively in the director of the agency. In your shoes, I am competent in that. The next person up, I don't know. So a standalone OMMA is only as effective as the oversight and the input that those of us in the industry are able to convey to them. It's only as effective as our input is considered, as long as our input is considered. Primary issue is all of this legislating on top of existing good bones, I'll say, of our regulatory system is just creating an additional burden on us licensees who are doing things correctly, and in many cases in the form of
a moratorium or a license cap, not only does it add an additional burden, but then it also basically eliminates our ability to expand our operations, which again, in the absence of the market contracting, we need to be able to expand either in the form of our available customer base or in our existing operations being expanded in general. And a moratorium without a grandfathering or without any kind of ability for an existing operator to expand just further continues to penalize us. And then just briefly, the push and pull with the residency. You know, we are 100% Oklahoma owned. It makes zero difference to me. What I view as these residency requirements limiting foreign investment, foreign being Colorado, is limiting the ability for the state of Oklahoma to have outside investment come into the state. I don't understand the pushback. I presume it's due to constituent feedback that they're receiving, but I don't understand the goal that is accomplished here other than tying my hands in the event that if things don't improve, we have to offload this business, because that is the position that a lot of us licensees are in is, can we continue to operate in this environment? Do we sell? Do we close up shop, liquidate? And foreclosing an Oklahoma business from those options is foolish to me and unnecessarily constrains the industry even more than we already are. It's my 2 cents. I don't have any questions or anything related to this. I just wanted to give you all my view on it. You know, there's a number of bills that are really good for us too. The 280E one, to my understanding, what it does is it gives us a state tax credit to offset the additional obligation that a cannabis business pays to the federal government because they treat us like we're Al Capone. That is amazing. And, you know, kudos, I believe it's Fat Getters. That would be fantastic. Things like that are great. Like, it's not all bad, but, you know, I think it's important that in terms of the things that are gonna be hot button issues, moratoriums, caps, these things, you know, for what it's worth, wanted to give you all my view on it. And, you know, it's fairly consistent view among people in the industry that I've spoken with. Not uniform, of course, but, you know, just wanted to give you all my feedback as we continue in this legislative session, since we may not meet again until we're dealing with the bill and how to implement, you know, at the end of the session. So appreciate your time.
Thank you, Blake, for putting your opinion out there and speaking to the council and the public about that. To the council, do you have any questions or comments for Blake's comments? And we are always open to hearing how any bill would affect you and your area of expertise. Barrett is out at the Capitol every day on behalf of OMA, and I'm grateful to have him out there. So we are all ears and happy to always entertain any conversation about how a bill would affect you, your business, or your agency if that's the case. All right, so we have a new business, number 10, for any matter not known about or which could not have been reasonably foreseen 24 hours prior to this meeting. So that means anything that came up in the last 24 hours that wasn't able to be put on the agenda from council members. And then that last one is closing. Do I take a vote? Okay, so, all right, we have a move to adjourn from Michael Leek. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Dr. Mills. Cassie, please take the vote.
Blake Cantrell?
Aye.
Catherine Brewer? Yes. Ryan Zinn?
Yes.
Ryan Hendershot? Caroline Nelson?
Yes.
David Lewis? Jennifer Hawkins? Yes. Jennifer Boyle? Yes. Christy Evelyn? Yes. Mike Urban? Norma Sapp? Yes. Philip Jurina?
Yes.
Monty Kell,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan Brown,
Yes.
meeting's adjourned.
Hopefully next meeting, we will be in the, back at the Capitol where we can look at each other and talk.
Someone that comes over, we want to.